Welcome. I'm going to talk a bit about third chakra consciousness. In some of my previous videos, I went over first and second chakra perspectives or consciousness. In those videos, I revealed that each of our chakras can be considered as different perspectives or outlooks on reality, as well as a different developmental stage. So the third chakra is considered the adolescent or teenager stage. It is also considered to be a considerable shift in perspective from the first and second chakras. The first and second chakras do have some differentiations between them, but we can consider the third chakra to be sort of a leap in consciousness. When I am talking about the third chakra, different maps or different ways of looking at the chakras will place the third chakra in slightly different places. For example, some people really focus on the third chakra being more in the abdomen towards the belly button, but I'm going to talk about the third chakra as is considered in the basic seven chakra Western system as being the solar plexus. I mention this for a few reasons. First, there can be a little bit of confusion about where chakras are because of different maps. But also when I am talking about third consciousness perspective, it's important because chakras energetically, physically have to do with the area around them. So it's not just something happening in our midlines. It is going to be the solar plexus as well as creates, or at the very least, influences the area around it, which in this case would be the upper abdomen, as well as the diaphragm, our lower rib cage. And this is really significant because we have so many different organs that are sort of piled up right along our respiratory diaphragm. Basically the place where we breathe in and out that acts like a rubber band where it can expand or contract. But what is most significant, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, is that all of the organs that we have here, part of our intestines, our spleen, our stomach, our pancreas, also our liver gallbladder. So in particular, I will be talking about the liver gallbladder because the awakening of this chakra awakens a lot of anger in people. But let me backtrack for a moment. If I am talking about an adolescent perspective, so a teenager, maybe early 20s perspective, it is or can be a perspective that includes some of the following. And the first is some forms of aggression, which can be healthy, as I'll talk about, but also a perspective on reality in which they can view themselves as always having the right answer, always knowing everything, as well as looking down on others. Those of us who are past this sort of teenager stage can sort of laugh at ourselves and understand that teenagers feel like they know everything and kind of have that self-righteousness because they have limited life experience. And so once we get the wisdom of aging, we tend to shift our perspective a bit. That is, if we move beyond this sort of third chakra perspective. So one of the things that's really interesting about this perspective is that it is a leap forward in consciousness. And so this tends to be a real sticking point for people. I will say that the first three chakras are considered the personal chakras. And what that means is that basically we are working through our personal stuff in those three chakras. So inner child stuff, patterns we learned in childhood, experiences we had in school, that sort of thing tends to be where a lot of us get quite stuck. And so what happens when somebody starts to come into a third chakra perspective is that it is enough of an expansion of consciousness where they can easily look down and see that most of reality is stuck. Most of the people in reality are stuck in first and second chakra perspectives, ways of being, and that sort of thing. But there has not been further rising of consciousness, and so there is no compassion here that comes when the heart starts to awaken. What then emerges is a couple of things that are pretty typical, is arrogance, contempt for people that are in prior stages of awareness or consciousness, a feeling of superiority. And there is also the perspective that a lot of people get to is that they feel like because they have awakened their third chakra, that they are now enlightened because they are in a place that is quite different than, I would say, 95% of humanity. And so if the objective of the spiritual search is to be superior, to have that sort of ego stroked, that the person reaching third chakra awareness will find themselves to be quite enlightened and will spend a lot of time talking about people in first or second chakra awareness. And they will talk about those people with contempt, um, othering them, talking about them like they're sheep or they're stupid, or kind of all of those sort of teenager phrases that most of us have heard. Oh, people are stupid, they're blind, they're dumb, they're, whatever words can sort of come up do in this phase. And again, this is kind of a dual perspective because the person has, or at least has experienced part of their consciousness going to the third chakra, in which they do have an expanded perspective, so they can see people and where they are, they can see parts of themselves where they were. But there can still be, because we are still in the personal chakras, a lot of hatred, othering, contempt. And so you can see this from some spiritual teachings and some spiritual teachers as well, is that they have reached that third chakra consciousness. And so they are superior. Everybody else is to be looked down upon. There is no compassion present there. And I will share that another really common perspective coming from the third chakra viewpoint is that sort of adolescent nihilism, as I call it. And this has become more and more common these days. Well, it can happen in first chakra awareness. It really happens a lot of times in third chakra awareness as well. And what that thought is that everything is stupid. Everyone is stupid. Every form of spirituality is meaningless and stupid and dumb, and anybody who participates in it is an idiot. Even when I'm saying this, and perhaps when you're hearing it, you can hear the teenager aspect to it. Yeah, everything's dumb and stupid and everyone's a moron and everything is meaningless and, kind of these grandiose thoughts. Um, And what happens if any perspective reaches to the heart, any consciousness reaches to the heart, is a recognition of how meaningful things are. But somebody who has reached this perspective of the third chakra has enough expansion where they can look in on the first and second chakras, and they rightfully can see that a lot of people are stuck, kind of going through their childhood wounds, that a lot of spiritualities are either harmful or they're meant to comfort, they're meant to anesthetize, they are meant to bring order to chaos. And so there are a couple of reasons why people in the third chakra feel this way and look with such scorn on, kind of first and second chakras. And the first is recognizing that, yes, a lot of spiritualities are, um, meant to anesthetize, they're meant to comfort, they're meant to bring that order that I'm talking about. Like, we find a lot of comfort in having meaning provided for us. Oh, you're a number 8. Oh, you're an INFP. Um, oh, you were, born in this location. All of those sorts of things are a way to sort of organize and provide meaning. And so when somebody reaches the third chakra perspective, there is an awareness of how a lot of spiritual teachings and a lot of spiritual thoughts are quite false. They're illusory. But the biggest reason why there is contempt and scorn and looking down at others who are in first and second chakra awareness is that somebody who has some consciousness at their third chakra, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have resolved all of the energies and perspectives of their first and second chakra. So the hatred, the scorn, the othering that they express towards others is going to be about their own unhealed stuff that is still in the first and second chakra. Ultimately, who they are showing scorn for, who they are showing hatred for, who they are feeling superior to, are aspects of themselves that still remain unhealed. When somebody recognizes this, they can heal those aspects of the first and second chakra and bring more and more of their consciousness to the third chakra. In some of my books, such as Working with Kundalini and especially my latest book, Shadow Work for the Soul, I talk about the superiority-inferiority loop. And what that means is that we have a natural human tendency to want to be superior or inferior to others based off of our own self-worth, our own self-esteem issues. Again, all first, second, and some of the third chakra stuff. So basically all of our own stuff. And so a huge sign that somebody has broken through third chakra consciousness, they are moving upwards into the more kind of transpersonal rather than personal chakras, is that they have broken through the superiority-inferiority loop. And that means that they no longer need to be superior to others. They no longer need to be inferior to others. Again, like I mentioned, this is a place that a lot of people get stuck because a lot of people move into spirituality and they may not realize this because they are wounded and they want to feel special. They want to feel superior. They want to feel more important than. And so resolving issues in the third chakra often has to do a lot with self-worth. It has to do with the idea that we are worthy just as we are. We do not need to be faster, better, smarter, more spiritual than anybody else. This awareness will let us rise into our hearts where we can feel love and compassion for ourselves as well as other people instead of the hatred, misery, depression, animosity, contempt that happens when we are in kind of a third chakra or down perspective. When we are in the heart, it is our first experience of oneness. I'm just saying this to contrast, but a heart perspective is an awakening of the first time, for the first time possibly, that what we see in others, what we see in the world is a reflection of our own stuff. And so if we dehumanize others, if we hate others, if we feel contempt, if we feel superior or inferior to others, that is our own stuff to work on. We are making a series of projections onto reality. And so somebody from a heart perspective will understand this. Somebody who is really locked into the third chakra will be in that space of hating themselves, having contempt for themselves, dehumanizing themselves again and again. And it can be difficult to break out of this cycle because it is one of those things that we get so locked into, because so many of us are so wounded. And we so easily can use spirituality to feel more important, more significant, more special than other people without taking a moment and pausing and being like, oh, well, maybe what if I were to let this go? What if I were to be happier, more whole, more conscious, if I were to come from a place of love rather than hate, from a place of connection rather than separation? And so the basic question that I have for people that want to break out of the third chakra consciousness, which is breaking the superiority inferiority loop, is to ask themselves, what if I am an everyday, ordinary human being? And so this helps somebody break the grips of the remaining ego, of the remaining narcissism, of the remaining wounding that they have left, to have their consciousness expand even further and go into the heart. So I will also share, now that I'm talking about, egocentrism, is that when I work with people who are experiencing spiritual awakenings, especially intense ones like Kundalini awakenings and stuff like that, is that there's a tendency when there's a lot of energy rising to the center for people to kind of want to take over the world. This is partially because of the ability to kind of look back at the first and second chakra consciousness and have that expanded perspective, that sort of leap in consciousness that I'm talking about. It is also because when we heal our most basic wounding in our first and second chakras, we have a lot more energy. We're no longer spending a great deal of our energy fighting ourselves, uh, engaging with others that we hate or dislike or are outraged by in order to, distract ourselves from our own, pain. We're no longer projecting so much into the world. Um, but there is also another reason, and that is, like I shared, the third chakra is the last of the personal chakras. It is the last of kind of dregs of narcissism and ego that we have. And so people have the energy, but they also still have that part of themselves that wants to be large, wants to be superior. And so what happens is that, they want to become a CEO, they want to be on Oprah, they want to sell 1 million copies of a book and all of this sort of stuff. And so I will say that the world needs innovators, it needs CEOs, it needs people that run important foundations and do important work. But there can be a question of motivation, and if somebody is really willing to look at themselves, are they doing this in order to sincerely support others, in order to be of service? Or are they doing this because there is a part of them still that needs to be godlike or demigod-like? And that question will reveal a lot. The third chakra is called the power chakra for a reason. It is where we grapple with power on a personal level and also on a world level. We can also consider this chakra to be the world chakra. That is our vantage point. That is what we are seeing. And so, in terms of personal power, somebody, when they have consciousness being brought into this area, they can see where they felt powerless in the past. So all of that first and second chakra stuff and all of the mental loops, all of the feelings, all of the beliefs created, all of the anger and fear and everything that was created out of feelings of being powerless. What remains in terms of feelings of being powerless when we are at the third chakra will rise up for us to look at and resolve. And for a simple definition, I will say that personal power is the ability to create willing change in our lives. And so when we are locked in the first and second chakras, we are essentially always shooting ourselves in the foot. We are always getting in our own way. We always, if we're really locked in the first chakra, we will believe that reality is against us, that the world is against us, or kind of be stuck in that sort of martyr consciousness. When we move up to the third chakra, that victim reality very much releases and can be looked at. And so an important thing to understand about the energetics of the chakras is that they work in conjunction with one another. And so what this means is that when the third chakra opens, this is like another layer of the first chakra opens. So for simplicity, I will say that the odd chakras, 1, 3, 5, 7, work with one another, and that the even chakras, 2, 4, 6, work with one another. And so what this means is that when we reach a higher state of consciousness, a higher perspective, for example, our consciousness goes into the third chakra, that sort of unlocks a deeper layer of the first chakra for healing. And so this happens throughout chakras as we move through our system. For example, at the fifth chakra, another layer of healing from the first chakra will come up, as will another layer of the third. At the seventh chakra, same thing, except that there will be an opening and a creating of that pillar of light from the first to the seventh, going all the way through the system. And so what appears is kind of the last aspects of the first chakra that require healing. And so this is helpful to conceptualize because sometimes people don't understand why they are at a third chakra perspective, and all of a sudden a different layer of childhood stuff comes up. And so in the case of the third chakra, what will come up is material from the first chakra having to do with powerlessness, having to do with previous victimization. All the times and experiences that we have had in which we were victimized, in which we have been harmed, that we haven't fully absorbed yet. Sometimes we can intellectually understand what we have gone through, but we have not processed it or really absorbed it on a bodily level. And so that will tend to come up for people who are going through a third chakra perspective or third chakra opening, is this deeper layer of the first, as well as coming into greater power, that ability to create change, to simply do what we got to do in our daily lives without getting in our own way. And so I will pause and talk here a little bit about victim consciousness, because sometimes people talk about it in a really rude way. I will share that, or I should say, lacking consciousness, or I was going to say compassion, but consciousness too. Um, Someone needs to really feel and understand and absorb that they were victimized, they were harmed, and to have that seen and witnessed and validated, that needs to happen first before anybody can move on from feeling like the victim. If you tell a victim things like, or parts of yourself that have been victimized, just like, get over it, stop being in victim consciousness, that is not going to do anything. You might be spiritual bypassing, kind of looking away rather than towards what is actually going on in your psyche, in your consciousness. But that part of ourselves really needs validation. It really needs to feel all of the emotions it's feeling before it can release. So I will talk a little bit more about that sort of adolescent mentality of like, oh, everything's stupid, sort of thing, because it does tend to come up for people who are sort of locked in this consciousness or coming to it for the first time. If you look out at people, again, this is one of those sort of same things, is that somebody does need to work through the fact that, yes, they are right. They are correct. That part of their consciousness locked in that teenage mode is entirely right. The vast amount of spirituality out there is illusory. And so when that part of them can feel like that is right, then they can hopefully move on. But what tends to come up for people with this chakra is that world perspective. And what I mean by this being the world chakra is that the first chakra tends to be all about the self. We cannot look outward because we are too self-absorbed. We are too in our own pain. The second chakra can be thought of as a we chakra. We can see and relate to people that are close to us, or people who are exactly like us, people who think, act, believe, look, are from the same culture, religion, spiritual tradition, lifestyle, exactly like us. We're not able to see anyone else other than that. When we come into the third chakra, it is the world chakra. And so we begin to have the awareness that every single person that is around us, even if they have different perspective, different political affiliation, different religion, spirituality, skin color, culture, background, socioeconomics, whatever sort of difference we can kind of point out in our human natures, that we are all human. I will be very clear and say that this is not a spiritual bypassing of, I don't see color or something like that. I believe that that has very good intentions, but it is coming from a very naive place. Of course, we all have differences. Of course, we all experience reality differently. But there is an opening in this chakra to feeling compassion, starting to feel compassion and starting to recognize that other people's realities are valid. Before this period of time, we may not believe in people who are not exactly like us being human. We're in a first chakra perspective, or people not exactly like us, their life experiences being correct or true because we have not personally experienced them ourselves or our family hasn't. That's more of a second chakra perspective. But when we go into the third chakra perspective, we understand that people can have quite different experiences of reality as us, and we open to their humanness and the beauty of their expression. This happens much more in the heart chakra, that sort of beauty part. But in the third chakra, that world chakra, when the chakra starts opening, it starts to go beyond that sort of petty superiority inferiority loop. It starts to recognize and acknowledge and appreciate the differences in all humans. When we are really locked into that chakra, there tends to be a lot of anger that comes up. This is not only because experiences of powerlessness come up, but when we go to a world level, that world chakra, that power chakra, we start to see from a perspective in which things are in the world are unfair and unjust. And we experience a great deal of anger about this. In previous chakras, like the first and second chakra, there may be a belief that beliefs and myths that are anesthetizing, they're disillusioning, and those beliefs may provide a lot of comfort. What happens is that we rise out of those beliefs in the third chakra. The world is not fair. The world is not just. That there is a lot of uncertainty in the world. Some of the myths that are broken through at this stage can be simple myths, like the myth that we can have it all, or the myth that there is justice on some level, that the world is fair. There are all these really lovely things that we are taught, and that as children, we take in and we believe, because it would be nice if we lived in a world that was just, that was fair for all of us, in which there was not systemic oppression of power, in which there was not abuse of the land, in which people did not do horrible things to one another. And when we really truly allow ourselves to feel this and to know that we are correct in our perspective, that we can move out of the sort of spiritualities of the first and second chakra, in which things like we have myths that we can have it all if we only try enough, that if we are only spiritual enough, we will be healthy and wealthy and have a yacht. We recognize that 1 out of 4 children in the United States goes hungry every day. And it isn't because they didn't visualize hard enough the perfect, the perfect sandwich, that there are 6-year-old children that die of cancer every day. And I don't mean to provide harshness here, because it really provides us comfort to believe in this divine order, to believe in karma, to believe that good people get ahead, that the end result of spirituality is health and wealth. And so all of those myths start to break open, and a new perspective of reality is seen, in which that you can be the most spiritual person in reality, and you can walk outside and be run over by a car tomorrow, and it isn't fair, it isn't right, but that is how that is what happens with reality. And so there is a lot of feelings of unfairness and the lack of unjustness in the world, that happens. There can be some on a personal level, but the feelings of constantly being victimized, or the world being out to get particularly you, tend to be more first chakra. Somebody in the third chakra is more likely to be aware that reality doesn't serve the vast majority of us, that the people in power don't care for us, that, and even taking a step back further, that um, that a lot of the people that do get ahead are because they are not empathetic spiritual people. They are people who feel okay using and abusing others. Um, It is at this point in time in which people really start to notice how narcissistic that, people in reality are, people especially that are in popular culture. And so this can include celebrities, politicians, also includes spiritual teachers. I talked last time a little bit about the anti-guru, and so noticing that narcissism within gurus and anti-gurus, people t there can be a lot of awareness of things happening on more of a world level in this phase, and from that expanded perspective where we can see into what is going on in our reality from that expanded perspective. And at first, it is totally normal and understandable to feel angry, to feel those sensations of lack of justice and anger at them. When somebody is moving in depth to this chakra and its perspective, um, there can be a lot of that adolescent sort of I hate people that comes up, because there can be a recognition from this vantage point of how destructive people are, of how parasitic people can be, of what we are truly doing to the earth. And so those experiences rightfully create a lot of anger in people. And so the solution, so to speak, is to understand that this perspective and this anger is totally correct, and to sit with it and to feel it and acknowledge it and let it come up. Because when we fully acknowledge something, when we feel something, we can have awareness that moves beyond that anger into the clarity of the heart. I will say that it can be quite upsetting to people to recognize that not all things can be fixed, and to move on from that really childlike perspective into a more adult perspective of understanding that we do not have control over everything. Chaos rules as much as order does in our world. Um, But the flip side of this, and yes, I am going to talk about the positives, is that being in this consciousness lets you let go of a huge amount of anxiety, anger, and fear, because we spend so much time grasping for control or grasping for the illusion of control. We spend so much energy denying the reality that we can have it all, that if we were spiritual or perfected enough, that if only we were good enough, we would achieve something or have something in particular. And people never believe me until they actually experience it, but it is such a relief to let that anger go. It is such a relief to recognize that it is okay to let go of all of this need for order, for meaning, for this sense of, for participating perhaps in spiritualities that you once did. Since this is such a leap in consciousness, what typically happens with people is that their spiritual interest can change quite considerably. They might be looking back at their former selves again with contempt, or just being like, I can't believe that I was involved with that. But doing your best to offer yourself a bit of consciousness, a bit of kindness, a bit of compassion is the right way to look at things, and to just consider that you're spiritual, you had the spirituality you needed to at the level of consciousness that you experienced it at. So just because you are in a different place in terms of consciousness now, doesn't mean that the past things were stupid and sort of a teenage, that stupid sort of way. It just means that, just, like when you're 6-year-old, you play with certain toys, and as a 15-year-old or 20-year-old, you have different interests, different hobbies. It is the same sort of perspective shift, understanding shift. I will mention two last things. The first is that it is common for people who start having more consciousness in the solar plexus chakra to have a fair amount of existential despair come up. This can be towards the world. It can be like about really recognizing what as humans we do towards the environment. It is also because, just like I mentioned, the first and third chakra work with one another. And so a deeper level of depression, or despair, hopelessness, that deeper layer of healing comes up that needs to happen with the first chakra. And so recognizing this map again can be helpful. Okay, I'm in third chakra consciousness. In order for all of my consciousness to move up to the third chakra, I still have stuff from my childhood or some really heavy or dense energies to work on. That's fine. Let me work on those. And that can provide a roadmap to get my energies, all of my energies up to my third chakra. I will also mention that if we are able to work through our anger, rage, fear, all of those energies that come up in this chakra and with the deeper opening of the first chakra, is that we can move into healthy aggression. Believe it or not, we need aggression. Aggression, healthy aggression, gives us a backbone. It lets for us to state what we want and need. It lets us develop boundaries. It is difficult for us to develop boundaries without our third chakra being partially or fully online and with that sense of healthy aggression, because that healthy aggression within us is that force that stops people from just, treating us like a doormat, or stops us from freaking out, having an overloaded anger sort of expression at somebody broaching our boundaries that we may not have even clearly stated. Someone who starts having more and more of their consciousness in the third chakra will start to be able to sit with uncertainty, and be able to release some of the illusory control they were holding on to, which again can be quite a relief. The last thing that I will mention is more of a spiritual nature. In Chinese medicine, the liver, which basically crosses our diaphragm and very much has to do with our third chakra, that solar plexus, contains a consciousness or a spirit called the Hun. And so you don't need to remember that name, but this is an energy that very much has to do with our corporeal soul, basically our physical body. And so there is a lot of conjecture I can get into here, a lot of theory, but a really helpful thing to know on a spiritual level is that this energy, this spirit, has a lot to do with our dreams. And so somebody who has awoken this third chakra center will experience a shift in dreams. This may be dreams becoming more realistic. This may be dreaming true. This may be dreaming like dreams are like movies. Typically, what it is a going to sleep and an understanding that our dreams are not just this fuzzy other sort of place, but that dreams are actually different planes of reality, and that when we go to sleep, there can be some understanding that our dream reality is, I won't say just as important, but quite important, as important as our waking reality. So there is typically an uptick in dreams at this point when somebody awakens this center. And I will also say about that spirit is that, and about the third chakra overall, is that this is the last of our personal chakras. And so the question is, how do I know if my consciousness has gone up to my heart chakra, or how do I know if I'm locked in the third chakra? I will say that somebody who has broken through the third chakra, their energies start going up to their heart, will have much less or very little childhood stuff to work on. They will also have broken through the superiority-inferiority loop. They no longer have the self-esteem, self-worth, ego, narcissism issues that need to have that person be seen as superior, special, because in the heart there can be a recognition that we are worthy exactly as we are, even if we are just the imperfect human beings that we are. So that is it. I hope that that is helpful, and I've enjoyed sharing this with all of you.